The recipes are still there. The flavors are still in our memory. Some things, thankfully, never really leave. There is a kitchen you can still walk into. If you close your eyes and let yourself go back, you know the one. You've known it your whole life, even if you haven't thought about it in years. It is there. It has always been there, waiting at the back of everything you are. The floor is linoleum, cool and faintly worn near the stove and the sink. The countertops are Formica, smooth and certain beneath your fingertips. The refrigerator hums. The percolator is waking up. And somewhere in that room, before you can even see her clearly, you can feel her. The woman who made that kitchen live, who gave it its particular warmth and smell and order, who poured her days into it like water into a good pot and turned it, quietly and without ceremony, into something that fed you and formed you and followed you here into the rest of your life. We've spent a long time together in that kitchen. 30 visits, 30 long walks through the rooms of memory, through the smells and the sounds and the colors of a world that existed, fully and completely, in a decade that feels both very close and very far away. We have talked about the food and the tools and the rituals and the philosophy of a way of living that was particular and beautiful, and sometimes hard, and always, underneath it all, an expression of love. And now we have come to the end of that walk. We are standing at the door. The table behind us has been cleared. The dishes have been washed and dried and put away. The light is fading. And before we turn and go, there are 2 questions I want to sit with you a little while longer. 2 questions that have been moving beneath the surface of everything we've talked about, like a current beneath still water. What did that kitchen really teach us? Not the recipes, though the recipes were real and important and still live in our hands. Not the techniques, not the timing, not the way you know by smell alone when something is almost done. Those things matter. But what did the kitchen teach us about being human? About living carefully and generously, and with patience and love? What did it teach us that we didn't know we were learning because we were just children, just hungry, just present in a room where something was always happening for our sake? And why? After all these years, after all the decades and the changes in the other kitchens we have stood in since, why do we still long for that particular room? Why does the smell of a roast in the oven on a cold afternoon pull us so instantly backward? Why does the sound of a percolator, heard somewhere unexpected, stop us cold in the middle of whatever we were doing and hold us there for a moment in something that feels like tenderness and grief and gratitude all at once? Those are the questions this evening is for, and the answers are not new. You already know them. You have known them in your body and your memory, your whole life. We are just going to say them out loud, together, one last time, in the quiet of this kitchen that belongs to all of us. Do you see it now? Can you walk through it in your mind? That kitchen, your kitchen, the one you grew up in. Close your eyes for just a moment and let yourself be there. Let the linoleum come up under your feet. Let the smell of coffee and something baking meet you at the door. Let the colors settle around you. The avocado-green, the harvest gold, the warm chrome catching the morning light, the yellow of the curtains at the window over the sink. Let it all come back. Not as a photograph, not as a memory you're watching from a distance, but as a room you are standing in, right now, in the most real part of your mind. The morning begins the way it always began, with the sound of the percolator. That particular sound, rhythmic, reliable, rising, was the first language of the day. Before your mother said a word, before your father's footsteps crossed the floor, the percolator was already speaking. It said, "We are awake. We are here. The day is beginning, and we are going to meet it." The smell of that coffee filled the whole house. And you didn't even drink coffee. You were too young for it, or you didn't like it yet. But the smell of it was part of safety itself. The smell of coffee in the morning meant that someone was up before you, that someone had started things, that the world had been quietly ordered and prepared before you even opened your eyes. There was a woman at the center of that. There is always a woman at the center of that. She was up early. She was usually the first one up, or among the first. She had things to do before anyone else needed anything. She had lunches to pack, and breakfast to start, and a day to organize that stretched from the early morning coffee all the way through to the last dish dried and put away, the kitchen cleaned and closed, the house quiet, and her finally sitting down for just a little while before she had to begin thinking about tomorrow. That was her day. That was the shape of it. Morning after morning, year after year, through the whole decade of your childhood, through all the seasons and all the meals, and all the ordinary days that you didn't know you were supposed to notice. She never asked for thanks. The kitchen never asked to be remembered. But here we are. We have talked so much over these past weeks about what was on the table. The Sunday pot roast, which was not just dinner, but an event. The whole house given over to it from the early afternoon, the smell of it building slowly and deliciously through every room, so that by the time you sat down to it, you were already half finished with it in your imagination. The Saturday morning pancakes, golden and stacked, with butter melting into them before the syrup came. The griddle still warm on the stovetop. The Wednesday casserole, and you knew it was Wednesday, not by looking at a calendar, but by smell, by the particular comfort of cheese and breadcrumbs and something savory baking in the oven. The kind of meal that had no pretension and every virtue. These were not just meals. They were the architecture of the week. They were the way time was marked and meaning was made. Can you remember a specific dinner? Not just what it was, but what the table looked like, who was sitting where, what the light was doing. Can you remember the feel of the chair beneath you, the particular weight of the plate when it was set down in front of you, the steam rising from something just brought in from the stove? Can you remember a voice, what it sounded like, what it said, in that ordinary way of voices at dinner that you would give almost anything to hear again? The table was the center of everything. The kitchen table, with its Formica top and chrome legs, its vinyl chairs that were cool in the morning and warm by midday. That table held more than food. It held the family. It held the day's news, reported and debated. It held the silences that were comfortable and the ones that weren't. It held the homework done on one corner while something bubbled on the stove. It held the birthday cakes with their candles, the holiday meals with the good dishes brought out from wherever they lived the rest of the year, the everyday breakfasts that were so unremarkable that you never thought to memorize them, and how can barely reconstruct them and wish, with a quiet ache, that you had paid more attention. The good plate in your hands. Do you remember the weight of it? The particular dishes that meant something, that weren't the everyday set, the ones that came out for company or for Sunday or for no reason other than that someone had decided today deserved a little more care. There was a dignity in those dishes, a message in the act of setting the table with something better than necessary. It said, "This meal matters. You matter. Sitting together here, tonight, at this table, this is not nothing. This is everything." That was one of the things the kitchen taught us, though we didn't have words for it then. The dignity of the ordinary, the holiness of the daily, the idea, absorbed so gradually and so completely, that it became part of how we see the world, that caring about something, attending to it, giving it your effort and your time and your thought, was itself a form of love. That putting a good meal on the table was not a chore. It was a gift. It was a declaration. Nothing was wasted. That was another lesson, and it ran so deep in the kitchens of the 1960s that it was less a rule than a reflex. The leftover roast became the hash. The stale bread became the stuffing or the bread pudding. The bone became the stock. The drippings became the gravy. There was a philosophy in that which we learned without being taught it, that resources were finite and precious, and that throwing things away was a kind of carelessness that bordered on ingratitude. That you used what you had. You made it stretch. You found the second and third lives of things, and often those second lives. The Monday soup made from Sunday's bones, the Friday sandwiches built from what remained of the week, were the best meals of all. She knew how to make do. She knew how to plan. She stood in front of that refrigerator, and she saw not just what was there, but what it could become. She did arithmetic in her head that had nothing to do with numbers. The arithmetic of what a family needed, what the budget allowed, what she could coax out of what she had. And she did it every day, without drama, without complaint, because it was what you did, because it was the work, because the family at that table depended on it. If you could step back into that kitchen for just 1 hour, not to change anything, just to be there, what would you do? Where would you sit? What would you want to taste? Sit with that question for a moment. Let yourself go all the way back. You don't have to do anything or say anything. You just get to be there. 1 hour in that kitchen, in any moment of it that you choose. Would you want it to be morning, with the coffee going, and the radio on low, and the particular golden quality of the early light coming through those curtains? Or would you want the middle of the afternoon, when the house was quieter, and she was at the counter doing something steady and unhurried, rolling dough perhaps, or snapping beans, and you could just sit at the table and watch her hands, and you could just sit at the table and watch her hand, be absolutely at peace? Or would you choose the hour before dinner, when the whole kitchen was alive with heat and smell and purpose, and the table was being set, and something wonderful was only minutes away? There is no wrong answer. They were all the same kitchen. They were all the same love. The smells. We have come back to the smells again and again across these weeks. And we have to come back to them one more time, because they are the most powerful thing, the most immediate key to the past that human memory possesses. The smell of bread baking. That slow, sweet, yeasty warmth that filled the whole house and seemed to make the very walls friendlier, was a signal so deep and so old that it reached past your brain directly into your body. You knew, without thinking, that something good was happening, that someone was taking care, that you were somewhere safe. The smell of bread baking is not just a smell. It is feeling. It is the feeling of being loved without conditions, of being somewhere you belong, of existing in a world that has been arranged, at least in this moment, for your comfort and your nourishment. And the roast, the particular glory of a Sunday roast, beef or pork or chicken, that had been in the oven since mid-morning, filling the house with a smell so rich and savory and deep that it felt like the house itself was being nourished. You came home from church or from play, and that smell met you at the door, and you knew, with a certainty that bypassed thought entirely, that everything was going to be all right. Dinner was coming. The family was gathering. The table would be full. Or the pie. Late in the day, the cool smell of pastry and sweetened fruit, the particular cinnamon warmth of apple, or the sharp brightness of cherry, filling the kitchen as it cooled on the counter. You were not supposed to cut it yet. Dinner first. Always dinner first. But the smell was enough. The smell was its own small reward. The kitchen's gentle way of saying, "Be patient. Good things are coming. They are worth waiting for." And sometimes, on the very best days, the smell of something you hadn't expected, something she'd made as a treat, as a surprise, as an expression of a good mood or a special occasion, or simply because she'd had time and a certain kind of abundance in her. The smell of cookies baking, or a cake that wasn't anyone's birthday cake, or the particular glory of fresh doughnuts made at home on a winter morning. The oil warm and the sugar ready, the whole kitchen briefly transformed into something extravagant. Those surprises were part of the kitchen's language too. They were the kitchen at its most unguarded. The love in it spilling over the edges of the ordinary and becoming something festive and unexpected and purely joyful. Patience. There is another lesson. The kitchen of the 1960s ran on patience. There were no shortcuts, or there were very few, and they were regarded with some suspicion. The pot roast took hours. The bread took the better part of a day. The stock simmered all afternoon. The pie dough had to rest before you rolled it. The dough had to rise before you baked it. The roast had to rest before you carved it. Everything had its time, and you could not rush it without losing something essential. She knew this. She had internalized it so completely that it had become a kind of wisdom. The knowledge that certain things could not and should not be hurried, that the waiting was part of the making, that patience was not a passive state, but an active state. 1. A choice made again and again in the face of hunger and hurry. We learned that from watching her. We may not have known we were learning it. We were just waiting for dinner, just restless and hungry and impatient the way children always are. But something was being laid down in us. Some pattern, some understanding that the best things require time and care and cannot be rushed into being. That understanding has served us in ways that have nothing to do with cooking. It has served us in everything. Who is standing at the stove in your memory? What is she making? And can you still taste it? She had her specialties. Every kitchen had its particular genius. The dish or two that was her own, that she had made so many times it lived in her hands, without needing her mind, that your family talked about at gatherings, and that you still, if you're honest, you've been trying to recreate ever since. Maybe it was a particular way with a roast chicken, the skin crackling and golden, the house smelling like heaven for 2 hours beforehand. Maybe it was her biscuits, the way she worked the fat into the flour with her fingers, the quick baking, the pull-apart lightness of them, the butter melting in the moment they left the pan. Maybe it was her pie crust. Maybe it was the lemon cake she made for birthdays, or the chili she made when the weather turned, or the potato salad she brought to the church potluck, which people still talked about when they talked about that church. That specialty, whatever it was, had a particular power that went beyond flavor. It was associated with her so completely, so exclusively, that tasting it anywhere else, at any other table, made from any other hands, was a kind of ghost experience. The thing tasted almost right, almost like itself, but it wasn't quite, because the thing itself was inseparable from the person who made it, from the kitchen she made it in, from the years of practice that went into it, and the love that was part of the recipe, even though it didn't appear. And the card, the potluck. That was community made edible, love distributed across a folding table in the church basement, or the neighbor's backyard. Every dish a declaration from the woman who made it. Here is what I know how to do. Here is what I offer. Here is my offer. Here is my particular version of care. You ate from dishes that weren't your mother's and tasted the distinct personality of other kitchens, other hands, other philosophies of food and seasoning and presentation. And then you went home and ate from your own mother's dish, and it tasted like home, because it was home, because you had made it home by eating it and loving it your whole life. The community that moved through and around that kitchen, the milkman at the door, bottles clinking softly in their wire carrier, the cold of them on a warm morning, and sometimes he had a word with her, just a brief exchange at the door, the ordinary social fabric of a neighborhood where people knew each other by name, by routine. The neighbor who came in without knocking and sat at the table and talked over coffee for an hour. There was something in that. The open door, the extra cup poured without being asked for, the easy willingness to stop what you were doing and give someone your time and your attention. That spoke to a way of living that has become harder to find. To find. The kitchen was not private in those days, not sealed off. It was the place where the community came in, where the neighborhood existed in miniature, where the small daily business of belonging somewhere was transacted over coffee and cake and whatever was on the stove. The children from the block, trailing in and out, always welcome at the table if they appeared at mealtime, because there was always enough, always something that could stretch another serving if you needed to. She set another place without comment or calculation. You learned from that, the reflexive generosity, the assumption of enough, the quiet dignity of setting a place for whoever showed up. You learned that a table could expand to hold more people if you simply decided that it would, that abundance is sometimes less a matter of what you have than of what you choose to believe you have. The father who came home in the late afternoon and stood at the door of the kitchen for a moment, breathing in whatever was cooking, saying something small and appreciative that meant more than it said. That moment of transition from the bowl world outside to the world of the kitchen was a daily ceremony that had no name, but was sacred in its way. He stepped across that threshold, and something in him relaxed. Something settled. The kitchen receiving him back into the life of the family. And she heard him come in. Rond. She knew the sound of his step, the particular way the door announced his return, and whatever was happening on the stove or the counter continued without interruption. But something shifted, a small brightening, a subtle acknowledgement, At the day was moving now toward its end, toward the table, toward the hour when the family would be together. The grandmother who came on Sundays and stood at the stove with your mother and talked in that particular way of women and kitchens, low and continuous and intimate, the language of shared work and shared life. Two women in a kitchen, the older and the younger, the one who had learned and the one who had been taught, working side by side in a space just big enough for the two of them, and the conversation between them had a quality you didn't he, or in any other room, in any other setting. It was the conversation of shared knowledge and shared history and love tested by years and proximity and all the ordinary frictions of family. And it was also the conversation of the kitchen itself. This tastes right. Add a little more. W.E. always did it this way. I think she would have done it differently. Do you remember when the endless, necessary conversation of women keeping something alive by talking about it and doing it and passing it on? What is the single most important thing the woman in that kitchen taught you? And have you ever thanked her for it? That question deserves to sit in the air for a while. Because most of us, if we are honest, never quite said it. Not in those terms. We said we loved her. We said, "Thank you for dinner," perhaps when we were reminded to. We showed up and ate what she made and accepted the labor of it as the unremarkable background of our lives, the way you accept the weather or the season. Not without gratitude, exactly, but without the specific, conscious recognition of had it cost her and what it gave you. And then the years went by, and the kitchen changed or disappeared. And she got older, and we got busier, and the explicit conversation, the one where you sat with her and said, "I know what you did, I understand now what it meant. I am who I am because of those years in that kitchen, and I want you to know that I know it." That conversation was harder to have than it should have been, and for some of us, it was a conversation that never quite happened in time. That is all right. The love was understood between you, even without those words. She knew. Mothers know. But if there is something unfinished in you around that question, if there is something you wish you had said to the woman at that stove, say it now, in your heart, in this kitchen that we are standing in together. She can hear it. Love like that doesn't end just because a person is no longer here to receive it. The sounds of that kitchen, we've talked about them across these weeks. The particular music of a working kitchen, and now we need to hear them one last time, together, as they fade. The percolator doing its morning work, that rhythmic, companionable burbling that said the day had started, and all was well. The sizzle of butter hitting the cast iron pan, that immediate and glorious sound of heat and fat, and something about to become delicious. The clatter of Pyrex on a Formica counter, a specific sound, a specific weight, the particular music of those mid-century kitchens that had their own material vocabulary. The refrigerator door opening and closing, its particular seal releasing with a soft pop and settling back with a solid chunk. The timer on the oven, the sound of a wooden spoon against the side of a pot, the radio low in the background. Always the radio, with its mix of music and news and the comfortable voices that filled the silence of a woman working alone in a kitchen and made the work feel less solitary. And beneath all of it, behind all of it, constant and low and so familiar you stopped hearing it, the hum of the refrigerator. That sound was the sound of the kitchen at rest, the kitchen breathing. It was there in the bustle of the morning and the quiet of the afternoon, and the cleaned and settled quiet of the late evening when everything was put away. It was the last sound of the kitchen at night when the lights went out and the house went still and only the refrigerator hummed on in the dark, doing its patient, faithful, unremarked work. You didn't know you were learning anything. You were just eating. You were just loved. The colors of that kitchen. We've walked through them so many times, and they are still so vivid. The colors of a decade that knew exactly what it wanted its kitchens to look and feel like. Avocado-green and harvest gold, those particular tones that feel both of their time and somehow eternal. The colors of abundance and warmth, and a particular American optimism that lived in the domestic spaces of that decade. The chrome that caught the light on the edge of the counter, on the legs of the table, on the handles of the appliances. The white of the oven, the slight variation in white that existed between different surfaces. Not sterile, but clean, with the warmth of use and years. The curtains, often a pattern. Small checks, or flowers, or fruit, that brought softness and domesticity to the functional space. The linoleum that had its own patterns, often geometric, that you memorized without meaning to, and that you would recognize 40 years later if you saw it again. There was a warmth in those kitchens that had nothing to do with the oven. It was in the colors and the textures and a particular way that everything in that room had been chosen and arranged with a kind of domestic intelligence. The intelligence of a woman who knew that a kitchen was not just a workspace, but a living room, a school, a community center, the warm heart of a home that needed to be not just functional, but welcoming. She chose those colors. She hung those curtains. She arranged the things on the counter. The canister set, the bread box, the ceramic cookie jar that you raided when you thought she wasn't looking, with a care that was its own form of artistry. The recipe box.I. We need to sit with the recipe box one more time, because it may be the most important object in the whole kitchen. Not the appliances, not the pots and pans, not the good dishes. The recipe box. That small, humble container, tin or wood or sometimes just a repurposed shoebox, that held her handwriting on cards stained with the evidence of use, splattered with grease or vanilla extract, or the juice of something red and sweet, written in a hand that was entirely hers, a handwriting you would know anywhere, on any piece of paper, in any light, because it was the handwriting of the person who loved you most completely in the world. Those recipe cards are more than recipes. They are documents. They are the evidence that a person existed, that she thought about things, that she had preferences and techniques and small discoveries that she wanted to keep. The notation in the margin, use a little less salt, mother preferred this way, is a voice. The correction made in a different pen is a story. The card so stained and worn that it's barely legible is a record of how many times she made that thing, how central it was, how much the family loved it, how completely she gave herself to the making of it. If you have one of those cards, if there is a recipe box in a drawer or a shelf somewhere, in her handwriting, with her corrections and her preferences and her small domestic wisdom, you hold something irreplaceable. You hold her hand. You hold her voice. You hold the kitchen itself, compressed and preserved in ink and flour and time. Think about what it would mean to find, among old papers, or in a drawer you hadn't opened in years, a card in her handwriting, a recipe for something she made, something you loved, something you have been trying to reconstruct in your own kitchen for decades. That piece of paper would stop you. You know it would. You would stand there holding it, and the handwriting would reach across however many years have passed and touch you directly, bypass all the intermediate years, and land exactly in the kitchen of your childhood, in the room that smells of your bread and coffee and something savory, in the afternoon when she was at the counter, and you were at the table, and everything was exactly as it was. The card would do that. A piece of paper with her handwriting on it would do that, because her handwriting is her voice. Her handwriting is her hand in yours. Her handwriting is proof, held physically in your hand, touchable, real, that she was here, that she knew things, that she made things, that she cared about making them well, that she loved you in the way she knew best and most completely, by feeding you every day for all the years that you were hers to feed. The cast iron pan. The weight of it in your hands. That was the weight of everything. Cast iron that had been seasoned over years, over decades, carrying in its surface the memory of every meal it had ever made. The pan that your mother had from her mother, perhaps, or that she had bought when she first set up her kitchen and broken in herself over years of Sunday mornings and weekday dinners. That pan knew what it was doing. You could feel it when you lifted it. It had authority. It had history, and the food it made had something in it that no other pan could quite replicate. A depth of flavor that came from all those years of use, from the fat rendered into its surface, from the particular quality of the heat it held, and distribular quality of the heat it held. Ted. Dad. You didn't know that then. You just knew the food tasted right. The kitchen is beginning to quiet now, isn't it? Can you feel it? The way the end of the evening settled over that room. The dinner finished and cleared, the dishes done, the counters wiped, the kitchen returned to its nighttime order. There was a particular peace in a clean kitchen at the end of the day. She moved through it with the economy of someone who knew every inch of the space, putting things back in their places, restoring the order that would be undone again tomorrow. There was no fanfare in this. There was no particular acknowledgement of the labor it represented. She just did it, and when it was done, she might stand for a moment in the doorway and look at it. The clean, quiet room, the hum of the refrigerator, the dish towel folded over the handle of the oven, and something in her face, in those brief moments, was the thing close to satisfaction. This is the kitchen you built your life from. No wonder you still dream of it. We learned thrift in that kitchen. We learned it from watching her manage the week's groceries with an exactness and an ingenuity that was invisible to us at the time. Invisible the way breathing is invisible, the way gravity is invisible, because it was simply the natural law of that household. Money was counted. Nothing was wasted. The second use of a thing was not a failure but a skill, and sometimes an art. The roast that fed the family on Sunday became the sandwiches of Monday, and the soup of Tuesday, and the hash of Wednesday, and every transformation was complete and satisfying in itself, none of them lesser meals for being made of what came before. We learned that abundance is not about having more than you need. Abundance is about using what you have with wisdom and care. We learned that from her. We live by it still, many of us, even when we don't recognize it as something we were taught. There was a particular intelligence in the way she organized the week. The Sunday roast was not just Sunday's dinner. It was the foundation of the week's meals, the anchor from which everything else extended. She knew this when she put it in the oven. She was thinking ahead, past Sunday, into the week, planning the meals that would follow from this one. That kind of thinking, that forward-looking, nothing wasted, everything connected thinking, was a form of domestic genius that we rarely called by that name, but that is exactly what it was. It required memory and foresight and a thorough understanding of her family's needs and preferences, and of the mathematical relationship between what she had and what she needed to make it last. She was, in those quiet daily calculations, a kind of artist. And the medium was food, and the canvas was the week, and the audience was the family at the table who benefited from her planning without knowing how much planning had gone into it. We learned the dignity of domestic labor. That one is harder to talk about, because the world has had a complicated relationship with domestic labor for a long time, and perhaps by the time we were old enough to form opinions about it, there were questions being asked in the culture, about whether the kitchen was a place of fulfillment or confinement. But what we knew, what we saw every day with our own eyes, was a woman who took her work seriously, who planned and organized and executed with genuine skill, who understood that feeding a family well was not a simple thing, who brought to the work a kind of professional rigor and pride that the culture didn't always recognize. But that was there, absolutely and undeniably there. The kitchen was her domain, and she ran it with competence and care. And whether that work was chosen or assigned, whether it was celebrated or overlooked, it was real work, essential, skilled, demanding. And we were its beneficiaries every single day. She had standards. She had methods. She had opinions about the right way to do things, about the proper temperature for a roast and the correct thickness for a pie crust, and the particular moment when you knew, from the color and the smell, that the bread was done. Those opinions had been formed over years of practice and the slow accumulation of experience, and they were as real and as rigorous as any professional knowledge. She didn't have a degree in it. She had something better than a degree. She had the knowledge in her body, in her hands, in her nose, in her eyes, and her understanding of heat and time, and the alchemical transformation of raw things into something nourishing and beautiful. That is mastery. That is what mastery looks like when it lives in a kitchen rather than a classroom or a boardroom. It is not less mastery for where it lives. We also learned, watching her, that love can be expressed without words. That is perhaps the deepest lesson of all. She didn't always say, "Ye love you," over the pot roast. She didn't explain that the pie was an act of devotion. She just made it. She just put it on the table. And you ate it. And something passed between you that needed no words. That was all the more powerful for being unspoken. This daily, unremarkable, miraculous exchange of care and nourishment. She gave, you received. The transaction was so ordinary and so constant that it was invisible. But it was love. It was love made edible, made daily, made real. That is what the kitchen was, in its deepest nature. A love language that functioned without grammar, without rules, without the risk of being misunderstood. Food doesn't lie. A meal made with care tells the truth. The hours of labor in it are audible in the flavor, visible in the presentation, felt in the warmth. And when you sat down at that table, you were eating not just the food, but the intention behind it, the love and the thought and the work that had made it possible. You were being told 3 times a day, every day of your childhood, that you mattered, that you were worth the effort, that someone was thinking about you, planning for you, taking care, and that sustained nourishment, not just physical but emotional and spiritual, is what you carry from that kitchen into every room you have lived in since. We are the last generation to remember that kitchen, that food, that world. When we are gone, who will remember it for us? And does it matter if we carry it in our hearts until then? That question is not meant to make you sad, though it might a little, because sadness and love are so close to each other when the thing you love is something you cannot keep, cannot go back to, cannot show anyone who wasn't there. The kitchen of the 1960s exists now only in memory. The house might still stand. The room might still be there, though rearranged, remodeled, repainted in other colors by other hands. But the kitchen, the living kitchen, with its particular smells and sounds, and the woman at its center and the world that moved through it, that kitchen is gone. It is held now only in the bodies and the minds of the people who lived in it. People who are, yes, at the end of the afternoon of their lives, in the beautiful and tender and particular moment when the day's long light is going golden. But here is what matters, that those memories are not less real for being old, that the love in them is not less present for being past, that a smell or a sound or the feel of a Formica tabletop in your memory is a genuine experience, a real touching of something real. And it connects you across all the decades, across the unbridgeable distance of time, to the woman who so years stood at that stove, and to the child you were, and to the life that was being built in that room every single day. We carry that kitchen, not as nostalgia, not as a mere ache for what is gone, but as inheritance, as formation, as the set of values and understandings and ways of moving through the world that were given to us in that room by that woman at that table, meal after unremarkable and miraculous meal. We carry the thrift and the patience and the generosity. We carry the understanding that care expressed in food is a form of love as real and as lasting as any other. We carry the knowledge of what it means to feed someone, not just to nourish their body, but to say to them, with every plate set down in front of them, "You matter. I thought about you today. I prepared for you. Sit down and eat and rest." And we carry something else. Something harder to name but equally real. We carry the understanding of what it means to be present, to be in a room, fully in a room, paying attention to what is happening in it. The kitchen of the 1960s demanded presence. There was nothing to distract you from it. No screen, no notification, no constant elsewhere pulling at your attention. There was the stove, and the pot, and the smell, and the timer, and the sound of the family moving through the house, and the knowledge that in some number of minutes something would need to be attended to, stirred, checked, taken out, allowed, to rest. What? The kitchen kept you honest. It kept you here, and spending your childhood in that room, eating in it, doing homework at the table, watching her work at the stove, being part of the daily rhythm of it, gave you a basic training in presence that the world beyond the kitchen has made increasingly difficult to practice. But you know how to do it. You learned how to do it in that room. You carry that capacity for presence the way you carry everything else the kitchen gave you. Quietly, naturally, as part of who you are. Do you see it now? Your kitchen, with everything it held? Can you walk through it in your mind and feel every surface, smell every smell, hear every sound? Can you stand at the door of it one last time and let it be what it always was? Not just a room, not just a kitchen, but the place where you were made. The percolator is quieting now. The last cup has been poured. The radio has gone to something distant and soft. The evening light in the kitchen, that particular golden hour when the day begins its long descent toward night, is doing what it always did. Turning everything it touched to warmth, catching the chrome edge of the table and the evening light via the refrigerator and the worn place on the linoleum near the stove, and making them all beautiful, making them all matter, making them glow with the ordinary and extraordinary fact of their having existed, having been real, part of a life that was real. She is at the counter, her back to you. She is doing something steady and unhurried. Her hands know exactly what to do. She doesn't need to look. She has done this 1,000 times. She has done it 1,000 times, and she will do it 1,000 more, and she does not know. She cannot know that you are standing here in the doorway watching her with the full knowledge what this moment is, what it has always been, what it means. She just knows it is time to make dinner. She just knows her family is coming home. She just does what she has always done, the daily labor of love, in the kitchen that was her domain and your world. You didn't know you were learning anything. You were just there. You were just a child in a kitchen, hungry and present, and unaware of how much was being given to you in every ordinary moment. But something was being laid down in you. something deep and permanent and shaping. And you feel it now, don't you? You feel it in the way you still notice the smell of bread baking. You feel it in the way a cast iron pan feels right in your hands. You feel it in the way you set a table with more care than you strictly need to, because something in you knows that care is the point, that the table is a declaration, that the meal is a gift. She gave you that. The kitchen gave you that, and you have been giving it forward, in your own way, in your own kitchens, your whole life. What did that kitchen teach us? This is the answer we have been building toward, across 30 weeks, across 100 smells and sounds and stories and meals. It taught us that love is a verb, that caring for someone means attending to their daily needs with consistency and thought. That feeding a family is not a domestic chore, but a profound act of service and devotion. That thrift is not poverty, but wisdom. That patience is not passivity, but a form of mastery. That community is built at tables and sustained by the willingness to make enough for whoever shows up. That nothing is wasted when everything is used with gratitude. That work done with care and skill has dignity, regardless of whether anyone is watching or whether anyone says thank you. And that the most ordinary moments, the Wednesday casserole, the Saturday morning pancakes, the Sunday pot roast coming out of the oven at just the right time, are not backdrop. They are the thing itself. They are the substance of a life. We didn't know that then. We know it now. We know it because we have lived long enough to stand at the other end of those years and see the whole arc of them, and to understand, with a clarity that only time gives, what those kitchens were and what they gave us and what we owe them. And why do we still long for that room? Why does it call us back across all the decades with a pull that never quite weakens? Because in that kitchen, we were known. We were expected. We belonged. The table was set for us, specifically and without question. The meal was made with us in mind. Our hunger was anticipated, and our presence was welcomed, and our smallness was accommodated by the largeness of the love in that room. And you can live a whole life and go through everything that a life contains, the triumphs and the losses, the expansions and the contractions, the years of abundance and the years of making do, and still, somewhere in the deepest and most key, honest part of you, be looking for that. Still be longing for the kitchen where someone knew you were coming home and had something warm on the stove for you. Still be standing in the doorway of that room, smelling the coffee and the roast and the bread, knowing you were loved. That is not a small thing to carry. It is everything. The recipe box is closed now. The lid has been settled down. Her handwriting is inside. The cards stained and worn and beautiful. Her voice preserved in them. Her hands, her knowledge, her love. The box will be there whenever you need it. You can open it any time. And even when you don't, you carry the cards in your memory, the recipes you have made so many times that they live in your hands now. The particular knowledge that passed from her hands to yours over years of watching and helping and doing. The inheritance that cannot be lost because it is part of you. The kitchen is quieting. The dinner is finished. The dishes have been dried and put away with care. The counter has been wiped one last time, the hand moving slowly over the Formica, making sure, making clean, restoring order. The dish towel is folded and hung. The good plates are back in their place. The cast iron pan has been given its own particular attention, wiped and settled, ready for tomorrow. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. Think of the sound of that. The end of evening sound of a kitchen being restored to itself. The particular quiet that descended when the last thing was put away. It was a different quiet from the kitchen's empty afternoon quiet, or the breakfast rush quiet. It was a completed quiet, a finished quiet, the quiet of a day's work done and done properly. The kitchen returned to its orderly self, ready for tomorrow's beginning. She moved through that restoration of order as she moved through everything in that kitchen, without commentary, with a kind of practiced ease that had taken years to acquire and that looked, from the outside, like effortlessness. It was not effortless, but by the time you were old enough to notice her doing it, she had been doing it long enough that it had the quality of effortlessness, the fluid competence of someone who has mastered a skill so thoroughly that the mastery is invisible onto themselves. She moves to the door. She pauses there, the way she always did. The last look at the kitchen before she turns off the light. The refrigerator hums softly in the dim. The percolator is cool and clean and waiting for morning. The chairs are pushed in at the table. The curtains at the window are pale in the last of the evening light. The room is still and full of everything that happened in it today, and every day before today, and everything that will happen in it tomorrow. The coffee and the breakfast and the lunch and the dinner and the ordinary miraculous daily work. K, of feeding the people she loves. She turns off the light. The kitchen is dark. The refrigerator hums. And you stand there in the doorway for just a moment longer because you're not ready to close the door yet. Because inside that dark, quiet room is everything. Every meal, and every morning, and every voice, and every smell, and every lesson given without being named, and received without being recognized. Every Saturday morning with the pancakes stacked, and the syrup, and the butter. Every Sunday with the roast, filling the house with something that felt like goodness itself. Every Wednesday with the casserole, every birthday cake, every potluck dish carried across a neighbor's yard, every school lunch packed before the sun was fully up, every last bite of pie that tasted like the end of something perfect. You stand there and you breathe it in, one last time, the ghost of coffee and bread and roast and something sweet, the particular smell of that particular kitchen that is unlike any other kitchen in the world. That is yours. That is home. And you say thank you, not out loud perhaps, but with everything in you. You say, thank you to the room, and to the woman who filled it, and to the years that happened in it, and to the child you were, who didn't know how lucky he was, how loved she was, how extraordinary the ordinary was. You say thank you because there are no other words big enough, and because those two words, said with the full weight of everything you now understand, are sufficient. More than sufficient. God. They are everything. We are the last to remember. Yes, we are the last ones who were children in those kitchens, who sat at those tables, who were formed by those meals and those mornings and those particular colors and sounds and smells. When we go, much of what we carry will go with us, and that is the nature of things. The way time moves, the way the world changes, and certain rooms and certain ways of living pass from the present into the permanent past. But carry it we will, for as long as we have. In the way we set a table, in the way we make a roast on a cold Sunday, in the recipe cards we save, and the cast iron we pass on, and the stories we tell to anyone who will listen about how things used to taste, and why it mattered, and what it meant. We carry that kitchen in our bodies, and our memories, and our hands. We carry the woman who was its center, her patience and her skill, and her unremarkable, immeasurable love. We carry everything she taught us, even the things she didn't know she was teaching, even the things we didn't know we were learning. We are that kitchen. We always have been. And so the last thing to say is this: the recipes are still there. The flavors are still in our memory. The woman at the stove is still there. When we close our eyes, her back to us, her hands certain and sure, the whole kitchen alive around her. The morning light, or the evening light, or the particular midday light of a weekday afternoon fall, being across the Formica, and the chrome, and the curtains, and making everything glow, she is still making something. She is still thinking about us. She is still putting her whole self into the daily, sacred, extraordinary work of feeding the people she loves. She never left. She is still in every meal we make with care. She is still in the way we taste something and know, without quite knowing how we know, that it needs just a little more of something, salt, or time, or love. She is still in the way we sit down at a table and feel, however briefly, however faintly, the particular piece of a family gathered to eat, of food made with thought and care, of belonging somewhere, of belonging somewhere, of being right now in the right place. That kitchen was never just a room. It was where we became ourselves, and it is still there. Not in the house, not in the address, not anywhere you could drive to and find, but in the deepest and most permanent part of who you are. It is there, and it will always be there, and you can go back to it anytime you want, anytime you need it, anytime the world is too much, and you need to remember what it felt like to be somewhere safe and warm and loved, without condition. Go back to it. Stand in the doorway. Whoa. Breathe in. Say thank you, and carry it with you, as you have always carried it, as you will always carry it. Not as a weight, but as a gift, as the kitchen that made you, as the meals that nourished you, as the love, patient and daily and unremarkable and miraculous, that shaped you into the person you became. Some things, thankfully, never really leave.